The greatest industrial system ever built was not destroyed by war, recession, or bad management. It was built for a world that no longer exists. That single sentence explains more about the current state of global manufacturing than 1,000 headlines about factory closures or layoffs. This is not a story about failure. It is a story about rules changing faster than the institutions built to win the old game could adapt to the new one. Let's be clear from the start. This documentary is not about Germany failing. It is not about the decline of a great nation's industrial base. And it is not a eulogy for an economic miracle. What you are about to hear is something more interesting and, frankly, more useful. It is the story of how the entire framework of global industrial competition shifted underneath the feet of the companies that once defined what it meant to be an industrial superpower. For more than a century, the biggest and most respected industrial companies on the planet competed using a fairly consistent playbook: mechanical engineering, manufacturing precision measured in fractions of a millimeter, combustion engines refined over generations of trial and error, massive, deeply coordinated supplier networks spanning dozens of countries, and above all, production scale, the ability to make millions of complex physical products reliably, year after year, decade after decade. That playbook built empires. It built Volkswagen, Mercedes-Benz, BMW, Bosch, and Siemens into names that were not just companies, but symbols of national identity and engineering excellence. Today, that playbook is no longer enough. The companies now leading global industry are not necessarily better engineers in the traditional sense. They are playing a different game entirely. One built on software, artificial intelligence, battery chemistry, autonomous manufacturing, robotics, deep vertical integration, and above all, speed of iteration. This is the central tension this documentary will walk through, piece by piece, using verified facts, not speculation, and industry analysis, not political opinion. To understand how dramatic this shift really is, you have to understand what made the old model so powerful in the first place. Germany is the perfect case study, not because it is uniquely troubled, but because it represents the absolute peak of 20th century manufacturing philosophy. For generations, German industry was built around a simple but incredibly effective idea. Take mechanical engineering as far as humanly possible. Refine internal combustion technology until it became a genuine art form. Build supplier networks so precise and so deeply integrated that a single delayed part could ripple through an entire national economy. Companies like Volkswagen, Mercedes-Benz, and BMW did not just build cars. They built systems of production so disciplined that quality control became a kind of cultural signature, recognized and respected worldwide. Behind those automakers stood companies like Bosch and Siemens, the invisible architecture of German industrial strength. Bosch perfected the components that made combustion engines efficient and reliable. Siemens built the industrial machinery and electrical systems that powered factories across Europe and beyond. Together, this ecosystem created something extraordinary: a manufacturing culture built on decades of incremental improvement, where being slightly better than you were last year, consistently, relentlessly, was the entire strategy. And for 100 years, it worked. It worked so well that German engineering became shorthand for quality itself. But here is the uncomfortable truth this documentary has to confront. That model was optimized for a specific kind of competition, one where the product, once designed and manufactured, was essentially finished. A car built in 1995 and a car built in 2005 followed largely the same logic: better metal, better tolerances, better assembly, but fundamentally the same kind of machine. That world rewarded patience, precision, and scale. It did not reward speed of software updates, because there was barely any software to update. Then something changed, and it changed faster than almost anyone in the traditional industrial world expected. The center of gravity in global manufacturing began shifting toward electric vehicles, artificial intelligence, battery technology, robotics, software-defined products, and vertically integrated production systems. This was not a single event. It was an accumulation of pressure that became undeniable over the course of less than a decade. Consider what a modern electric vehicle actually is. It is not simply a combustion car with the engine swapped out for a battery. It is closer to a computer on wheels, a product where the physical body is almost secondary to the battery chemistry inside it and the software running its brain. This is where companies like Tesla entered the picture, not as a traditional automaker trying to out-engineer Volkswagen or Mercedes-Benz on their own terms, but as a technology company that happened to build cars. Tesla's advantage was never primarily about superior metalwork. It was about controlling the entire stack: the battery, the software, the manufacturing process, and the ability ability to improve the product after it had already been sold through updates pushed directly to the vehicle. That idea, updating a product after it leaves the factory, is almost completely foreign to the old industrial model. A 1995 sedan could not become smarter over time. A modern electric vehicle can. This single difference represents an entire philosophical break between the 20th century factory and the factory of today. And this is where the recurring idea of this documentary becomes impossible to ignore. The old factory was designed to repeat. The new factory is designed to learn. That sentence deserves to sit with you for a moment because it captures the entire transformation in 10 words. Traditional manufacturing rewarded perfecting a process and then repeating it with extreme discipline, year after year, with only gradual refinement. The new manufacturing model rewards constant adaptation, where factories are filled with sensors, real-time data streams, predictive maintenance systems, and artificial intelligence constantly analyzing production in order to improve it, sometimes hour by hour rather than year by year. This is not a small operational tweak. It is a complete reorganization of what a factory is for. Digital twins, virtual replicas of physical production lines, allow engineers to simulate changes before ever touching a real machine. Robotics handle tasks with a level of precision and adaptability that would have seemed like science fiction only 20 years ago. Cloud-connected production systems allow manufacturers to adjust output in near real time based on demand, supply chain conditions, or even software feedback from vehicles already on the road. The factory has stopped being a machine that repeats a fixed process. It has become a system that continuously learns and adjusts. Now, no discussion of this industrial transformation is complete without addressing China, and specifically companies like BYD and CATL. This is where the documentary has to be especially careful, because it would be easy, and lazy, to frame China's rise purely in terms of scale or cost advantages. That framing misses the real story. China's industrial ecosystem succeeded because it aligned itself almost perfectly with the exact technologies that now define competitive advantage. Electric vehicles, battery production, solar manufacturing, robotics, and industrial automation. The scale of this shift is documented, not speculative. According to the International Energy Agency, the global electric vehicle market has continued to reshape both manufacturing patterns and international trade relationships in ways that directly challenge legacy combustion-based industrial ecosystems. And the numbers tell a striking story about where production has concentrated. Germany, still one of the most capable industrial nations on Earth, produced 1,670,000 electric passenger cars in 2025, a genuinely impressive figure that placed the country second globally. But second globally in this case is a distant second. China's electric vehicle production reached 16.1 million units in the same period, a scale nearly 10 times larger than Germany's output. That gap is not simply about cheaper labor or looser regulation, although both play a role. It reflects a deeper structural alignment. China built dense, tightly integrated battery and electric vehicle supply chains specifically for this new industrial era, combining state-backed industrial policy with genuine manufacturing execution speed. Companies like CATL became dominant not by accident, but by mastering battery chemistry and production scale at a moment when the entire automotive industry needed exactly that expertise. This is not a story about China being ahead in everything. It is a story about China being extremely well positioned for the specific technologies that now define industrial leadership. Meanwhile, NVIDIA represents another piece of this puzzle entirely, one that often gets underestimated in conversations about manufacturing. NVIDIA does not build cars or batteries, but the artificial intelligence chips and systems it produces have become foundational infrastructure for autonomous manufacturing, robotics, and the software layer that now sits on top of physical production. In many ways, NVIDIA represents just how far the definition of an industrial company has expanded. Competitive advantage today is not only about what you can physically manufacture, it is about who controls the compute and the intelligence that increasingly directs how everything else gets built. This is the moment where it becomes essential to separate verified fact from broader narrative, because a responsible investigation cannot blur that line. It is a verified fact reported by Reuters that Germany's automotive sector could face the loss of approximately 186,000 jobs by the year 2035. This figure comes from an industry association study connected to the German auto industry itself, and it points to specific pressures including high electricity costs, elevated taxation, and regulatory complexity as major competitiveness concerns. This is not speculation, it is a documented projection from within the industry. It is also true, based on Reuters reporting connected to Boston Consulting Group analysis, that roughly 20% of Germany's industrial value creation has been described as